pre-sales engineer. For those of you who have not worked with Jasco before, our aim is to drive efficiency, productivity, innovation, and mitigate risk for our customers through the use of technology. When COVID hit, companies Australia-wide were faced with the reality of enabling their workforce to operate remotely. This followed with a long list of challenges, such as procurement of laptops and devices, management of remote devices, access to company resources, collaboration and communication, and the big one being security implications. Due to the rushed nature of meeting these requirements, we have witnessed that many companies have had to spend much of lockdown continuously patching and building upon band-aid fixes. Office internet connections have struggled to handle the increased traffic load. Companies have had to outlay significant capex to increase remote access VPN licensing or increase resources in their remote desktop platforms. Hardware procurement still remains an issue today, and for months, users have had to communicate via mobile phone while expensive ISDN and SIP services remain unused, costing companies money. With all this disruption, back a bit, Gav.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
With all this disruption, users turn to implementing their own solutions to these problems. The one that seemed to be the hardest to control was unified communications, with users adopting solutions like Zoom and Google Meets. Apart from the well-publicised security issues that these platforms have dealt with, it has also created a management nightmare for businesses and their ICT teams. At Jasco, we've been preaching the benefits of a cloud-first strategy for years now, and luckily many of our customers are now benefiting from this approach. This has allowed them to spend their time focusing on what COVID means for their businesses and operations rather than being distracted by ICT shortcomings. Compounding the issue that, sorry, Siri is talking to me. Compounding the issues that Australia businesses are facing, there was also announcements at the end of June about the increased level of cyber attacks against Australia and Australian businesses, resulting in the investment of $1.35 billion in the Australian Signals Directorate and Australian Cyber Security Centre. Since these announcements, we have experienced an increase in outreach from our customers for clear direction and advice on what these threats mean and what businesses can do to improve their security standing. The focus has shifted from the threat of crypto lock attacks and business interruption events to the threat of sensitive data leakage. Most of our advice has been directed towards strategies such as penetration testing, advanced threat analytics and protection, and data loss prevention. Thanks, Gav. Next slide. It's also important to recognise that COVID has back one.
Sorry.
It's also important to recognise that COVID has impacted each industry and work scenario differently, and that there is no cookie-cutter solution that fits everyone. Corporate environments seem to be the simplest to address, with users usually only needing a PC and access to business systems. Retail operations have had to close stores, resulting in a huge shift towards e-commerce. Contact centres have been forced to modernise away from traditional closed offices to virtual contact centres. This has forced a higher reliance on monitoring of outcomes and key performance indicators of staff. Remote learning and remote medical consultation has become the norm. However, there are still significant drawbacks to both of these that are still yet to be addressed. Farmers have had to leave crops in fields to rot, as the shutdown of hospitality means that they have much fewer buyers. And real estate agencies have had to invest in technologies to facilitate virtual tours. With so many scenarios to cater for, Microsoft are being forced to invest heavily both in their own platforms and in their partner capabilities, which more and more we are seeing coexist harmoniously. Many of the technological solutions to these problems are being built on Azure and Power Apps platforms, all back-ended by Microsoft's data analytics and artificial intelligence services. The need for dynamic and feature-rich set of ICT systems has never been greater. Next slide, please, Gav. With all the doom and gloom aside, there actually has been quite a bit of positive news that has come out of the COVID crisis. Polluted airways are clearing up, air quality is improved, wildlife is thriving, and many families are saving money while being confined to their homes. But one of the greatest positives relevant to us has been the unprecedented investment in technology, with some technologies advancing years in a matter of months. Examples being the development of dual-use respirators, the enhancement of digital classrooms, and virtual medical consultation. The Microsoft Teams has been no exception. Since the original lockdown in March, Microsoft have released 90 plus features and enhancements for Teams and currently have about 90 more in development. There are currently no other Microsoft 365 applications, features, or services that are getting this sort of attention, and the changes are being noticed by their customers. Almost all of my conversations with our customers include Teams now, and almost all of our customers have adopted it in some way or another, whether that is for its collaboration tools, the video conferencing capabilities, or for the security capabilities protecting against data leakage. Microsoft have also invested significantly in their own services in relation to security and capability. The Microsoft Graph API is in constant development, assisting devs to produce systems that will work with the Microsoft Cloud platforms. This is resulting in many third-party solutions to your remote working challenges now being available. Intune MDM features are constantly being expanded, lessening the need for on-premise management systems such as group policies or System Center. Gav, we've lost the slide deck.
Okay, technology's let us down. I'll get there, Mike. Sorry.
No, not a problem, mate. I'll just keep talking. I think we're up to slide 7.
Got it there now. Everyone can see that. Oh, I've gone too far.
I think that might have been me. The guests must have permission to take control and then cancel the sharing.
Yeah, I think that's what happened.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Improvements in the reporting and alerting capabilities of the advanced threat protection offerings, and Windows Virtual Desktop platform has recently had an update providing a significantly improved and simplified management interface. This ongoing investment is another great example of why Microsoft Cloud can work for you. Even if you are already invested in the Microsoft Cloud platforms, I would suggest continuing this journey. I am yet to meet a customer that has exhausted all the functions and capabilities that are available to them. Next slide, please, Gav. At Jasco, we've been promoting the benefits of cloud for a long time and adopted a cloud-first strategy ourselves about 10 years ago. This meant that we were forced to change our mode of operation back in March. When we were forced to change our mode of operation back in March, we were already in a great position. We did have our challenges, as everyone did. However, the impact was significantly lessened by our cloud strategy. Our main 2 challenges were that our service desk staff had to be supplied with laptops, and we had to perform an OH&S assessment on all our staff's home working environments. Apart from that, all our operating systems were already SaaS or IaaS based. We already had all device management and security best practices implemented and had adopted Microsoft Teams as our primary collaboration and telephony platform. Athletics Australia, one of our managed service customers, adopted a cloud-first strategy a little over a year ago, primarily driven by the security benefits of the cloud. At the time, there was a very clear set of threats in the media, which we were seeing impact many businesses similar to Athletics Australia. And an assessment on their requirements directed us towards Microsoft Cloud as the solution. Although the remote work aspect of cloud was of interest to Athletics Australia, it was not the driving factor at the time. What we did not realise was that we had actually created a near perfect environment for athletics to be able to quickly pivot and adapt to remote working. Everything they needed was now in the cloud. There was no need to change any systems or implement any remote access technologies. They just picked up their laptops and started working from home. Unlike us, Teams was not a major consideration for Athletics Australia. However, like many other businesses, it has now been organically adopted due to its expansive collaboration features, simple video conferencing, and that it is already included in most of the entry-level Office 365 subscriptions. Adopting Microsoft Cloud solutions and Teams has taken away the technological pain that many businesses had to battle with and has allowed Athletics Australia to focus on their business instead of ICT. With the realisation that COVID will be with us for a long time to come, if you have not adapted a cloud strategy, I would urge you to investigate what cloud can do for you. Not only the benefits of remote working, but the security and capability enhancements that Microsoft Cloud services can provide. To talk to you about how Microsoft is leading the way in cloud security, I'm pleased to introduce Microsoft's cybersecurity and compliance lead, Kenny Singh. Kenny has been kind enough to lend his time and expertise, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the insights he will bring in regard to zero trust security. Thanks, Kenny.
Thanks, mate. Thank you so much. Look, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about Zero Trust here. Zero Trust is top of mind for lots of our customers. We get questions about Zero Trust and what it really means from a technological standpoint and how it applies to the remote work environment that we all find ourselves in today. How does it actually apply? We get these kind of questions all the time. So just a little about myself. So I'm Kenny Singh. I lead cybersecurity and compliance here in the partner organization in Microsoft Australia. We've been working very closely with Jasco on remote work and cybersecurity and compliance across the board. I've been in Microsoft for about 9.5, 10 years. I come from a consulting background. I was in Microsoft Consulting Services for many, many years, working on some pretty large Office 365 and Azure migration programs across Australia. Can we go to the next slide, please, Kev? Right. So just to set the context, we come from a world where security was very simple. You know, it was simple in the sense that all you basically needed to do is build a walled garden, right? So now the walled garden in the context of a corporate environment would be something like a corporate network, right? Initially, you would have a corporate network. Anything that was on the corporate network was implicitly trusted. Anything that was not on the corporate network was it just could not access corporate information, right? By extension, as the IT sector evolved, as people began to work from different places and different machines and so on and so forth, there was an expansion of this walled garden. Instead of you physically being present on a corporate network, you could access resources on the corporate network from outside using something like a VPN. Okay? The notion of accessing data from devices that were directly controlled by the organization or managed devices, that was a notion that's been with us for a very long time. Then came the trends of bring your own devices, people bringing in their iPhones and Android phones and a whole plethora of different devices and operating systems, and how the organization could enable these devices to access the data of the organization, but ensure that the data was secure as it was at rest and as it actually moved throughout its entire life cycle, including the use of the data as well. Right? So to cut a long story short, the notion of traditional security has been expanding quite rapidly over the last several years, starting from a corporate network boundary to VPNs, to managed devices, to bring your own devices. Can we go to the next slide, please, Kevin? Right, so how does Zero Trust fit into this picture? So the situation that we find ourselves in today, and it's been accentuated over the last several months by the coronavirus situation, is people can potentially work from anywhere. Right now, I'm actually presenting. I'm in Melbourne, so we're in a stage 4 lockdown, so I'm actually presenting from home. I work from different locations myself. For example, sometimes I'm working at vWorks locations that Microsoft has affiliations with, and a whole plethora of partner and customer sites. Yep. And there's lots and lots of people increasingly who are in that situation. So how do we make sure that irrespective of where the person is accessing the information from, irrespective of what device the person is using, whether that's a personal device, a BYOD device, a CYOD device, or a fully managed device, irrespective of where the data lives, whether that data lives on the customer's corporate network or it lives in the cloud. How do we make sure that we cater to all of these different scenarios and all of these different paradigms, ensuring security, but decreasing the friction that people feel in using that data? Right? Because friction, in a tussle of friction and security, when that happens, security one way or the other loses. Right? People will actually find ways of working around security, and as an organization, we don't want that. Next slide, please, Kevin. What does Zero Trust really mean? So Zero Trust basically means that irrespective of where the user is, on what device, and where the data lives, when the user attempts to access corporate data that's valuable to the organization, that data is protected at access time and then throughout the course of that data's life cycle. Right? So that's essentially what Zero Trust means. So it basically means implicitly, we don't trust any access attempt to data. once the user and the user's device presents specific evidence. Now that evidence might be the identity of the user, which might be secured by multi-factor authentication. We'll talk about that in a few seconds. Or it could be a managed device that's fully compliant, or it could be a bring your own device, the user's own personal device that actually has a security bubble on it. So we've actually secured the applications, which we'll also talk about. Unless that evidence is presented, the evidence that elevates the trust that the organization has in the user's access attempt. So this is not the trust in the user itself, but in the user's access attempt. Once that trust is elevated, only then do we grant access, right? So that's the whole paradigm of zero trust. Implicitly, don't trust anything. Get the entity, the user in this context, that's authenticating, that's accessing the data to present evidence that elevates the trust, that then gives us the confidence to give them the access that they request from us. The next slide, please, Kevin. When we think about zero trust, there's essentially three phases at a high level that we think about. The first phase of a zero trust journey always starts with identity. In the second phase, we bring in things like microsegmentation, so segmenting networks. In the third phase, we bring in the device layer, which is all about the health of the device, whether that's a managed device or an unmanaged device. And then it culminates all the way to data. So what that basically means is that the data itself is protected with DRM, irrespective of where it goes, whether it ends up on a USB stick or it ends up on some kind of a hard drive, or wherever it actually ends, it itself is self-protecting, right? So those are sort of the high-level four phases of zero trust, right? Starting with identity, going into microsegmentation, so putting the controls on your network segments themselves. So even if the corporate network was compromised, the attack is contained, culminating into device level security, and then all the way to data security itself. So you'll hear us talk about identity being the new control plane a lot, and it's the first step in the zero trust journey. And the reason for that is that irrespective of where you access the data from, whether it's on the corporate network or outside, what device you're actually accessing the data from, one thing always holds true: you'll always have to authenticate to access the data. Right? Anonymous access is not a practice that you want to implement for data at any degree of sensitivity. Right? So if we follow through with that, then identity becomes the new control plane. So it's the first and foremost thing that we need to protect. And with zero trust, with Azure AD conditional access, with multi-factor authentication, that's our attempt at securing identities first and foremost. If we go to the next slide, please, Ken. Right. So assuming all the resources, or assuming that any access attempt at any point in time is suspicious. So the question we actually get very often is, why be this paranoid? I'll actually illustrate it by a case in point. If we don't assume that a specific access attempt is inherently insecure unless the accessor proves otherwise, we end up in situations where you might actually have a managed device on the corporate network, right? So the perfect ideal security situation. But you might actually have a compromise on the device. You might have some kind of a malware on that managed device, right? So if we assume that because a device is managed and because it's on the corporate network, it should have access to the company's resources, that's a dangerous strategy. Because we have zero-day malware, we have sophisticated malware today that may or may not be detected by endpoint protection solutions or endpoint detection and response solutions. So we always assume a breach. First and foremost, we assume a breach, and then we get the devices, the accessors, to present evidence to us, which actually then elevates the trust and then hence the access to data. Next slide, please, Kevin. Right, so we've gone through this, so we never trust, we always verify. The other example that I just wanted to bring to your attention is that you might have a trusted network boundary, right? So for example, you might say this specific IP subnet segment is inherently trusted. But you might actually have a hacker break into that specific IP subnet segment, and you might have a rogue device on that segment, right? So if you base your access decisions, data access decisions, on any of these specific metrics, whether that's a specific network segment, whether that's just the device being managed itself, all these conditions alone are not sufficient to ensure that your data access is protected and the data will actually stay secure throughout its entire life cycle. So next slide, please, Kevin. Right, so the industry defines zero trust with these pillars that you actually see there on the screen. Yeah, so I'll just call out a couple of them specifically. So if we think about microsegmentation, so what does microsegmentation really mean? We've seen a significant exponential increase in data compromises across the globe. I'm sure you folks are quite aware of all the data leaks and data theft reports that come out in the media on a daily basis, pretty much. Yeah. So how do we ensure that with microsegmentation, we protect against that? The analogy that we like to think of is if you visualize a battleship. In the battleship, you have compartments. If water gets into one of the compartments, you can seal that compartment, and that protects the rest of your battleship. So that's the whole fundamental notion of microsegmentation. So what that basically means is you have a corporate network, or you have a network that has some kind of data on it that's important to the organization. Whether that network lives on premises or it lives in Azure, microsegmentation is possible everywhere, right? So you've designed the network in such a way where one part of the network or one segment of the network being compromised does not necessarily ensure that the hacker is now going to be able to laterally move and compromise other segments in that network. Then we have the response pillar. We have significant automation built at various layers of the zero trust model, where if the artificial intelligence and machine learning driven algorithms in Azure AD conditional access, which we'll talk about in a few seconds, if they detect that it is a suspicious attempt, they will proactively stop that access attempt from proceeding. For example, Gavin logs on from Melbourne, and 15 minutes later, we see a log on from Gavin from Sydney. Right? That's an impossible travel scenario. So the system will realize that, and it'll trigger an elevation of risk, which can then be used to apply additional controls to the zero trust model. So next slide, please, Kevin. Okay, so that brings us to Azure AD conditional access. So how does zero trust relate with Azure AD conditional access? So zero trust is an industry term. Yeah, it's not Microsoft specific. Azure AD conditional access is the implementation or the layer or the capability that implements zero trust. It makes it real in the organizations. Right. So with Azure AD conditional access, and I'll just walk you through a range of conditions and actions on the next slides. Can we just move to the next slide, Kevin? Right. So with Azure AD conditional access, you have conditions and actions. Conditions are things like some of the things that I mentioned before. What specific IP subnet range are you coming from? Whether your device is managed or not, whether your device, more importantly, is compliant or not. And compliance in this context means whether it's properly patched, whether the endpoint protection and detection response systems are signaling that the device is healthy, and so on and so forth. It also takes into consideration whether your identity itself is manifesting behavior that might be suspicious, right? So you have conditions around users, devices, applications, locations, and the risk, which is all based on AI and machine learning. Then you have actions, or also known as controls. So based on the conditions, the orchestration of conditions, you can put specific controls in place to protect that specific access attempt. So I'll leave you with one example, one specific example. Let's assume for 1 second that you have someone accessing your data from an unmanaged device. Right? You still want that person to be able to access the data, because you don't want people to not be able to use their personal devices. It's a huge cost-saving factor to your organization that you not provide people with every single piece of equipment. Yeah, so you're allowing people, you're enabling people to use their own personal devices. They're coming from an unmanaged device. So how do you ensure, as an example, when they use content in SharePoint Online, that content is protected throughout its life cycle? So on that unmanaged device, you know that when they work with that content, first, they're actually prompted for multi-factor authentication. Second, as they work with that content, the session is restricted. So they can still edit the documents, they can still work with the documents, but they can't mass download the documents. So these are the kind of scenarios that Azure AD Conditional Access makes real in its implementation of Zero Trust in an organization. So with that, I'll actually hand it over back to you, team. And once again, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'll stay on for any questions that might have come through to the channel, or if someone wants to ask a question directly.
Thanks so much for that, Kenny. All right, for the next section, I'll invite Gavin McClintock, who'll be discussing Microsoft Teams and remote working around that. Thanks, Gav.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will apologise in advance. The way the stars have aligned today, I had got a notification from Australia Post that I have a delivery due today, and I will guarantee you that my doorbell will ring in the next 15 minutes while I'm doing this presentation. So one of the joys of working at home. A little bit about myself. I'm the Unified Communications Team Lead at Jasco. I have been involved in the Microsoft UC stack since OCS days. So I've got a sort of a 10-year plus history with Microsoft UC and working with Teams. So we're obviously doing this presentation today via Teams. Many of you will be using Teams as in a daily basis. Some of you will be using or accessing this meeting via the web clients that come with Teams. That you can use, whether it be Chrome or whether it be Safari or whether it be Edge, to be able to join Teams meetings. So it gives you the flexibility to join from many different locations. Teams is really the glue of the hub for teamwork within Office 365. It leverages just about every component of the Microsoft Office 365 stack in one application. We can communicate with each other. We've got the chat function, which is one-to-one, one-to-many, and we can also do Teams-based chat or channel-based chat, which I'll talk about in a second. We have our meetings. This is a Teams meeting. And we also have calling, so we can do calling, video calling or audio calling between each other, between members of people within the same organisation, and also federated Teams calls as well. The collaboration component of Teams is one of the really sort of key aspects of the remote working solution. It was really built for that dispersed remote working scenario where you have teams that are located in different locations, like all of us are now, who need to share and collaborate, share files, collaborating via text or calls or meetings, and have all that information in one spot. It's got strong, very strong integration with the Office, the standard Office stack, the Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Those files are natively available and appear in our Teams channels. Teams is also a great customization platform. There is many third-party applications that you can integrate with Teams, but what you can also do is develop your own workflows using the Power Platform to bring those line of business processes into a single pane of glass for people across your organisation, so that they only need to go into Teams to see that or to access that. And leveraging what Kenny was talking about earlier, it also provides you with that security, compliance and manageability focus of all of the tools that Kenny mentioned earlier. So the MFA and conditional access is all supported through the Teams application. And there are then a number of things that you can do in terms of setting compliance around Teams to make sure that there's data retention and all those types of things along with it as well. One of the key aspects of Teams is that it is a fundamental thing around what we're all experiencing now in this remote working and the COVID, and for the folks that are in Victoria, a really strict COVID lockdown, is the calling in Teams. Regardless of the device that you're using, you get a consistent user experience across all of those devices, whether it be your PC, whether it be your Mac, your Android phone, your iPad, or your iOS phone as well. One of the things that we saw that a lot of businesses are leveraging or moving towards now or requesting of us is to integrate the PSTN calling aspect into the Teams client as well. With a lot of people working from home, the traditional telephony environments didn't provide remote access solutions. So what we're seeing now is a lot of organisations coming to us and wanting to also integrate PSTN calling or their PSTN dial tone access into Teams as well. So just talking about Teams as a phone replacement at the moment, we've got a strong single pane. We've got a tab within the Teams client for calling. If you're enabled for what Teams calls enterprise voice or PSTN access, you can see your number displayed there, and you've got your dial pad in which you can dial numbers, or you can just cut and paste information or numbers directly into the field there. You've got your history of all of your calls, your contacts, your history, and your voicemails all in access in there. And you've got a really simple spot where you can go in, excuse me, to manage your call forward settings. So if you need to forward calls out to a mobile because you might be working or living in an area that's got poor internet, you can use that functionality there to send the call out to your mobile phone. How we bring PSTN access into Teams, we've got two ways in doing it, and we can do it via Teams, and we've got Sky for Business online until July of next year. You've got, obviously Teams is the platform that we're going to present this in. Your PBX in this scenario is the Microsoft phone system stack. And in terms of how we then bring PSTN access in, we've got two ways. We can use a technology called direct routing for Teams or Telstra calling for Office 365. Now, Telstra calling for Office 365 is a pure cloud experience. So when you think of the TCO offering or the Telstra calling for Office 365 offering, it is the equivalent of a Microsoft phone system plan that you would purchase in North America, in Canada, the UK, or the US. That's provided to you via Microsoft. In Australia, it is provided to you by Telstra. Telstra and Microsoft have integrated the PSTN calling aspect into. They were the world first in that model where a local telco from a country integrated the PSTN calling into Office 365. I'm aware of another that's now been extended to a carrier in Japan is doing that. And recently I saw some announcements that a European telco is doing the same type of model for a number of the countries in Europe. But in this mode, we don't have to have any on-premise infrastructure. We migrate our numbers or your numbers from your existing carrier to Telstra calling for Office 365, and they are directly plumbed into your Office 365 tenant. You see the numbers listed in your Teams portal, and you can assign those numbers to individuals. In terms of the way that we license that, the licensing options, if you've got an E5, all you need to do is add a Telstra calling for Office 365 SKU. They come in three options, an $8, $14, and an $18 plan. And it's basically the $8 plan is access. You pay for calls on top of that. The $14 option, you get national calls in that cost, but you don't get mobiles or international. And the $18 is a national all-you-can-eat plan. You have to pay for international calls on top of that. So if you've got an E5, you've already got your phone system, you've already got your audio conferencing, you're ready to go. You just need to add your TCO plan. If you've got an E3, you need to buy the phone system license plus your calling plan. If you've got an E1, you add your phone system and your calling plan, and you've got an option in there to add your audio conferencing options as well. Teams Direct Routing takes your existing telephony, whether that be a SIP trunk or PSTN, we'll just talk SIP trunk in that instance, with a certified session border controller to create a secure SIP trunk from your premises, your premises to Office 365. And we can plug or plumb third-party PBXs and analog devices into that on-premise based session border controller. So this option requires you to maintain some on-premises equipment, but it also gives you the most flexibility in terms of migration and support for legacy environments. Now, what we see a lot in that, which option is the best option for you, really depends on your circumstance, and we can advise you on which is the best way to go from there, or which is the best option for you. In terms of Teams Direct Routing and licensing, you only need your existing PSTN access method and your E5. If you've got an E3, you need to add your phone system. So you're still in this scenario, you're still paying for your per channel access for your SIP trunk, but you then only need to add the phone system licenses and all the audio conferencing system licenses on top of that. In terms of meetings, the Teams meetings gives us a consistent approach from everywhere, in the same way that calling, regardless of the device that you're on, you're able to get a consistent experience, whether it be from a mobile phone, whether it be from a room-based system, or whether it be from your desktop PC or an iPad. It's very intelligent, it's very intuitive to use, and it's when I go back to previous generation of meetings from Sky for Business, since I've been using a Teams meeting platform, it feels like I've gone back into the 1980s. Consistency is the key. So regardless of the device that you're on, you see a consistent view of everything around. As I mentioned earlier, you can join from your browser. You're not fixed to using a client application, a Teams client application. You can access this from browser-based technology with no plugins. No plugins are required. You can do live events, which is a broadcast technology of up to 10,000 users, and with the advanced communication SKU, that will expand out to 20,000 users. And you also have, for your Teams-based rooms, you've got one-touch join capabilities where you walk into a room, and you've also got proximity join. The calendar appointments automatically knows that you're going in there. It says join, and you're straight into a meeting. So the meeting startup lag is very small. Devices are the keys across Teams, and if you can have one takeaway from this session, is, apart from what Kenny and Michael have said, but from my side of things, and also what Eric's going to talk about, is devices. Devices are the key to a successful Teams implementation. We get a lot of support calls from organisations, from our support customers, who say, I've got poor audio quality, and when after we peel a few layers of the onion back, we find that they're actually using a non-certified headset device, or their manager's gone out and bought them a headset because they had to go home, and it's not a Teams certified or not a Teams certified device, and that really does make a difference across the implementations. I won't go into too much of Eric's thunder, so we'll just skip through that. In the way that Microsoft has responded to the COVID pandemic, really is a testament to them. Earlier on, when we first went into lockdown back in March, we only had 2x2 video, so we could only get 4 participants. The gallery view provided us with a new meeting experience up to 9 participants in a meeting. And then On top of that, we've now got large gallery mode, so it's 7x7, so we can have up to 49 folks in a meeting, which is really useful for those larger meetings, so that you can actually see everyone, because that's one of the things a lot of people miss. And then they brought in together mode, which is there's a lot of research behind the way that together mode was put together to bring everyone inclusive into the same room. And if you're a sports fan out there, some of the bubbles that are going on for the sports in the US at the moment, this is the NBA bubble court down in Orlando at Disney World. It's actually the virtual fan experience is powered by Teams, which is fantastic. And it's quite interesting because they will have celebrities who actually take a seat in one of the virtual fan experiences. And Michael and I were talking about this before, but in a Major League Baseball, someone had actually put the guy from Weekend at Bernie's in one of the virtual fan seats, which is fantastic. Microsoft also take user feedback. The blur feature that was originally put into Teams was a result of feedback from one of their engineers who was deaf and struggled to actually read her parents' lips, and she had this suggestion about doing black background blur, and the product team picked that up and pushed that through. I came across this other one recently where a teacher who has deaf children in his class made a suggestion in terms of the layout of the presentation, and that got picked up by one of the program managers in Austria, and she's then tagged in a number of people from the product team to do that. But if you have a feature that you want to bring into Teams, there is a site for that, Microsoft Teams User Voice. You can lodge a request, and if that request gets enough vote, the product team will pick that up and run with it and push that through. So that's all I've got. It was a little bit rushed, a little bit of death by PowerPoint, but if you've got any questions, please ask them at the end. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Eric Barber from Poly to give us an overview of his work from home experience, and also some of the devices that are coming on, that are here and also coming from Poly.
Thanks, Gav. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. Just pop straight into the next slide, Gav. I don't think people, let's get going. Don't worry about fluff slides. Let's go to get into it. So I was going to cover what 2020's taught me. So, you know, like most people, you probably worked at home once a week, once every couple of weeks, one day here or there, and that was your work from home experience. And being another Victorian on the call, and we went into lockdown in March. And so I've been working from this space since March, and what really was highlighted in this whole working from home experience is that the home working from office requirements, what they were when I started versus a month in, what they are versus, you know, nearly 6 months in, is very different. My home office is an office, it's a huddle space, it's a meeting room, it has a whole bunch of different requirements. And throughout the course of any given day, you know, I have my wife, she's a school teacher, she's in the next room, she's teaching class, and my requirements for my audio and video do change. But I'm lucky, I work for Poly, and so I do have some really good equipment at my fingertips that I can call on at any time. But I know that everyone doesn't have that luxury, and I know that I'm not the only one who can be having this same experience. Do you want to just jump onto the next slide quickly, Gav? This is my home setup. This is what I use throughout the course of a week to get me through what I need to do. On the left there is a Studio X30 running as a Teams collaboration bar. It is my meeting room experience device when I need to sit back and have a meeting where I don't want to be in front of a PC and I want to focus in on people. That's what I use, and it sits behind me, and it's an awesome user experience. But when you get to my desk, you can see I've got a studio, a web camera, a phone, my dedicated audio device, and a headset, and you can't see my speakerphone, but it is there. And although there's a variety of devices, this enables me to effectively collaborate. and it's overkill, I will admit that. And so if we go to the next slide, you know, we at Poly, we have a range of devices that suit a range of working styles and a range of requirements for everybody. You know, whether it's a simple webcam and, you know, a one-ear wired USB headset, or you want a Poly Studio, which is the all-in-one, it's what I'm using at the moment, speaker, cam, microphones, all-in-one package. You know, we have it all. And if you go to the next slide, please, Gav. You know, it's for most people, it's finding that flexibility between, you know, user experience. So not just the person sitting in the room, but the people on the far end, and that cost, and finding that balance. And what I've found is for my device sprawl, it really can be consolidated into probably 3 key pieces of technology: a good headset, a good speakerphone, and a good web camera. Between the devices, I can cover off 95% of what I do, and I can throw them in a bag, right? And walk out the door with them and go to another location and work. And that's where, you know, having those 3 really good products and then looking at some of the technologies that drive the experience, you know, noise block or acoustic fence for mic pickup. So when I'm at home and I have my studio, I have a door there, I have my wife on the other side. I have a thing on my studio called acoustic fence. And if I was to go and walk over there right now, which I'm not going to do because I'm actually sitting on a spiky board because I've hurt my back, there's a cutout. And if you stood at my door and yelled at me, you probably wouldn't hear it on the far end of the call. And those technologies really do help to have that consistent user experience, something on par with what people are hearing in an office environment, but bringing that to the home. Our 7200 Callisto down the bottom there is a speakerphone that has that technology in it. So it's not just on the studio. Our new 8225 headset on the left there, it has it in a headset. So it's actually done on the boom of the headset. And so by looking at your device requirements and what you need from a user experience, what you can do is you can build up these little bundles that you can enable people to work effectively. And why that's going to be really important is our guys over in the US are just putting some polish on some research that says, you know, it's going to be a 40% split. People are going to be working from home out of a proper home work environment, you know, for about 40% of their time. Right. And it's going to be a very consistent thing moving forward. People are, you know, organizations are realizing that people don't have to be in the office to work effectively. And it's perfectly acceptable for someone to sit in a home office and deliver outcomes, right, with the right equipment in the same way that they would in an office. So these kind of combinations around flexibility really build that. And the reason I say that is, you know, I can see a bunch of people on video wearing headsets, and, you know, why a speakerphone and a headset? I find that after a whole day of a headset and then a whole week of a headset, because I live on video calls, you know, headset fatigue is real. And having that ability to have a really good experience on a speakerphone that just sits on my desk, that I don't have anything on my head, really enables me to interchange how I work, right? Making me more productive. So if we just go to the next slide. You know, we can take that to the next level. Poly have a range of devices, whether it's, you know, the Studio USB, which I'm using at the moment. From a trainer's point of view and those people who do deliver things remotely, the Studio USB is a fantastic product. I normally would demonstrate what we call presenter mode, and I will quickly try it, but my video is tiny, so it may not work. But what presenter mode does on the Studio USB is it will find me, it will frame me, and I can actually move around my space, and I can go into my demo center and I can talk to people, and my Studio USB will actually follow me around the room, and it becomes a really cool working experience. Not for me, I don't notice any difference, but people I talk to on the far end really do get to see what's going on around me. And then, you know, for some of those executive style experiences where IT departments might want to put in some, you know, manageable appliances that are just for Teams meetings, you know, we have that covered in the Studio X30 and the X50. And as well as that, some of the desk phone experiences. Microsoft have just released the latest version of software on the CCXs, which has Bluetooth better together. And I'm playing with that at the moment, and that's why I have a desk phone. And when I join meetings on my laptop, it gives me the option of joining the audio from my call off my desk phone or off my speakerphone. And so there's some really cool integrations coming along with, some of the Poly equipment and Teams that enable a really flexible working environment. Anyway, do you want to just go to the next slide, Gav? Returning to the office, Poly, when customers are ready and you guys are ready to go back to the office, come and have a chat, and we'll talk about some of the things we're doing in that office space, some of the new technologies we've got coming out, some of the new partnerships, some of the new ways of working that are coming to the fore as well. Gavin touched on it briefly before. Microsoft have got their proximity join. Microsoft's roadmap for Microsoft Teams rooms is really interesting, how they're extending that, how they're bringing the mobile device into play in the meeting rooms, some of the really cool technologies they've got of that zero-touch meeting room. So anyway, I'm going to leave it right there because I believe this is the time that Helen wants me to stop waffling, and I will stop talking.
Thanks for that, Eric. All right, just in terms of time restrictions, just wanted to make sure that we've got some time to do the Q&A and see if you guys have got any questions about anything that we've discussed today alongside doing the giveaways. But just before I do that, I just want to say a big thank you to, for everyone who joined today. For those of you who use your Uber Eats vouchers, I really hope you enjoyed your lunch. We hope that today's event really shed some light on the innovative technology that's available in market at the moment. And these tools not only will help all your customers and all your employees work productively and securely at home, but also when you're back in the office. So if you've got any questions, now is the time. Please note that, I will be emailing everyone after this with a recording of today's session, as well as some contact details to, if you would like some more information on anything that we've discussed today. So if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you just want to type that in the chat, please feel free. And please note that I will be giving away, I've got 2 Voyager 8 8200 headsets and a Callista 5200. Sorry, I had to look at the names of those with the numbers. But yes, so if you've got any questions, please, now is the time to ask.
I have a question off the bat. And it's probably to Eric more than anything, as he understands. My name's Scott Summers. I work for a company called Lumicom. It's good to see you, Eric.
Hey, Scott. Long time no see.
A quick question. Yeah, you bet it is. We live in an integrator world. So for the moment, nobody's working at the office, which doesn't really suit me. But I do have a question in regards to Teams and Zoom and the other VC systems that are out there. It's whatever it happens to be. Whenever one of the big problems that I have is companies will invest in Teams or they'll invest in Zoom rooms, and then the first thing that happens is they'll get invited to another type of VC system, and they can't use their Zoom room or their Teams room. So I'm just wondering where we're going with that. It's the first question I get asked, because customers, anyway.
Given the nature of the meeting and the platform we're on, we'll talk about how that's being addressed in the Teams world.
Yep.
So the first thing that I would talk about is that Microsoft have developed the concept of direct guest join. So that is where native Teams room, native MTR can receive right now, WebEx is the first cab off the rank. It will receive a WebEx meeting, and this has gone GA and has rolled right out to everybody. It will get a WebEx invitation that has a web join string in it, and it will present a join button on an MTR. And you can walk into your Microsoft Teams room and click to join into that WebEx experience. It will launch and look and feel like a WebEx meeting while you're on the call, and when you end the call, it will go back to looking like a Teams room.
Right.
And the same's coming for Zoom rooms. For Zoom meetings, sorry.
Yeah, for Zoom meetings, that's coming, and it's the same in both directions. So that means that the way Microsoft are working it with these partners is that they're co-launching. So when Microsoft enabled the click to join into a WebEx meeting, they also launched the ability for WebEx customers to click to join into a Teams meeting as well.
Right.
And the same will happen for Zoom, and the same will happen for other cloud video as a service providers as people are working with Microsoft to develop the technology.
Okay, so the Teams hardware that I buy today for my Teams room that we're setting up, you know, will ultimately work at some point with WebEx or Zoom.
Yeah, it works today out of the box with WebEx, absolutely.
So Scott, it needs to be one of the Microsoft Teams room devices.
Yes.
To support that. The collaboration bars don't support that.
Yep.
So it needs to be that full. The device that's on the left of the screen here is the device that we need to go with there.
Yes. Yep.
So if they've got a standards-based room, if the remote party's got a standards-based room, there is Poly have a video interrupt service called Real Connect that you can enable VTC devices to join a Teams room. So if the customer wants to be able to provide the most flexibility, they can subscribe to that service. It's a cloud-based service, and the invite that goes out to that remote party will have, if you're joining from a video conferencing room, dial this number from your device.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that question, Scott. We've just got a couple in the chat. So the first one is from Martin. With the prospect that more people will be working from home in future, is Microsoft looking at a productivity measurement component to Microsoft 365, or does similar functionality already exist? Gav, I think that one.
That's for me. I saw Jahan's on the call. Jahan, you want to take that one? There are some. One of the things, particularly around a Teams usage, is that they have released a Power BI desktop that integrates and provides significant information around the usage of Teams. Kenny's just posted in, look at the productivity score link there. But from a Teams perspective, and that's really my specialty, the Power BI desktop that is available for Teams and for that calling aspect is the key tool that we use to measure how productive and how adoption rates of the Teams stack to our customers.
We don't want to say that we play Big Brother, but if you would like to ensure staff productivity from home and just to keep an eye to make sure the activity log and what they're up to, again, without sounding like Big Brother, we can do that through Power BI. We can deploy that for your organisation.
So there's just a question on whiteboarding.
Yeah.
What is the better whiteboarding, Native Teams or Miro? Which is better? I'm not familiar with Miro.
All I will say to that one, Gav, is that Native Teams whiteboarding is built into our devices. The capability is written in by Microsoft into the devices. So from a usability and a consistency point of view, it's always going to be the native implementation.
And also we'll work on Surface Hub devices and any other iOS and Android devices as well.
Thank you, Jahan.
I think we've got another raised hand somewhere in there.
So the next one there is from Trish. She is asking and wondering if there is a package such as such for green businesses to do this. They have teams and sales guys working from home, admin working from home, and all have different desktops/laptops. Who is best to go to or talk to in terms of getting that package for them?
Right, so there is a bunch of free information that Microsoft provide through their websites on your journey to Teams. If you need any further information than that, you can definitely speak to someone on our sales teams, and that will definitely help us out.
Yeah, I do want to mention there is something called Windows Virtual Desktop, which ensures that no matter what device they're using, you are able to kind of have the same experience for all your staff, no matter what device they're working off. So that's something also we can definitely give you more information on, Trish. So I can send that out to you after this.
Ian, just your question there. What were the comments regarding benefits, disadvantages of Telstra calling versus direct routing? It really depends on your circumstances, what we need to integrate with, what your desires and directions are in terms of whether it be cloud only solution, whether you have legacy equipment that needs to be integrated in. All of those types of things add into the mix in what becomes the best solution for you. So it's really, I can't sort of give you an yes or either way answer here. We need to sort of investigate your requirements, and then we can recommend the best solution for you. Anthony, your question around the new meeting experiences. At the moment, there's been a slight delay in the rollout of the new meeting experience, and in some instances, it's been removed for some people. I believe the current timeline is to have it all done by the end of September, but there was a message bulletin that came out with an updated timeline for that in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, okay, thanks enough.
All right, have we got everything in terms of Teams features?
There's one question there from Shaz around price modelling for TCO versus TDR.
Yep.
There is no calculator because, so the TCO, it's set, the prices are what they are depending on the features you want to add. If we go down the TDR path, you need to start looking at contracted call rates. There is a SIP trunk. There's an SBC. We can go down a physical path or a virtual path. They also are licensed based on the number of concurrent calls. So depending on the size of your business, the SBC might be a cheap option or a more expensive option. So we have to, there is no tool, there is no simple way to cost analyze it. Reach out to one of our guys. We'll sit down, we'll look at the figures with you, and we'll make that decision. But generally, that decision is driven more by the technology than the cost.
All right, and thanks for that, Mike. And we've got a question from Abhishek as well. Gav, in terms of Microsoft Teams functionality and features, mobile applications seem to be ahead of updates, as in new features are being added and the desktop application is falling behind. Is there a reason for this, as he thinks that Teams would be used more on the PC than the phone?
I think sorry, Gav, go ahead.
Jahan, you jump in.
Look, I would actually challenge that question. I just want to know what, and by challenge, I just mean more information on which specific features you're talking about. Generally, we are shipping them at the same time, sometimes the PC version ahead of time before the mobile features. So would love to know which specific features you're referring to. You can reach out to us directly on that.
Like in general, you find that the new video features that were available in the desktop client first before they've only just made it the multiple, more than 4 video feeds down to the Android client. The iOS client seems to be a little bit ahead of the Android client in terms of when features roll out. So they're the bits and pieces that we're seeing. Okay, Helen, how are you going to manage the giveaway?
Yeah, so what I'll do is, because we've had quite a few questions, I will be emailing through the winners of the giveaway because too much to process, too many questions right now. So just when I send out the recording of the video of the presentation today for you to send across to anyone else who missed out, in that email, I'll also be including the winners of the Poly headsets. So just keep an eye out for my email to see if you're the lucky winner. And just before, because we've gone way over time, if you have any questions, again, I did mention that I'll be putting some contact details in that same email. So if there's anything else, please reach out. And that concludes our session for today. Thank you so much for everyone for joining. I really hope that you got something out of today, and I hope that we'll be speaking to each and one of you shortly. And I'll be ending the meeting now. Thanks so much, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
very much, guys.